Welcome, and thank you all for joining us for our 6th Art in the Libraries virtual program. I'm Beth Torin, Interdisciplinary Cultural and Film Studies Librarian, and I'm filling in for Sally Brown Deskins, WVU Libraries Exhibits Coordinator and Lead Curator of the exhibit we are celebrating the launch of today, Undefeated, Canvassing the Politics Around Voter Suppression Since Women's Suffrage. Today, WVU graphic design professor E. Faulkes will present on social justice design theory. Professor Faulkes is also the lead designer for the Undefeated exhibit. So just like last time, this session is being recorded and will be documented on the library's website for public viewing. We encourage your engagement and welcome questions in the Q&A and/or raise your hand function at the end of the program. At the end of the session, we will also post a survey link to get your feedback on the session. Closed captioning is available by clicking on the CC icon at the bottom of your screen. Co-host Thea Brown and I are excited to present the launch of our online version of Undefeated, Canvassing the Politics of Voter Suppression Since Women's Suffrage, an Art in the Libraries exhibit of art and educational content. The print design, led by our featured presenter today, WVU graphic designer professor E. Faulkes, will launch later this academic year. Thank you to all of your exhibit sponsors and partners, including Reed College, WVU Humanities Center, WVU Faculty Senate Community Engagement Grant, WVU Division of Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion, WVU Council for Women's Concerns, WVU Kennedy College of Creative Arts, West Virginia Humanities Council, Arts Monongalia, Catherine Wilson Jones, and Morgantown Printing and Binding, Print and Sign Superstore. Also, of course, thanks to our Art in the Libraries Committee, team of expert exhibition committee members and librarians for helping who put this exhibit together, and notably the Committee of Librarians who put together the scholarly LibGuide located on the website. Thanks to the PR team and Dean Karen Diaz for all their support in this. This third major collaborative exhibition, Undefeated, comes on the occasion of the 100th anniversary of the ratification of the 19th Amendment to the U.S. Constitution, granting women the right to vote, and the 55th anniversary of the Voting Rights Act of 1965, enforcing voting rights for racial minorities. Undefeated examines, through art and educational content, the political process with special attention to the efforts to suppress the votes of women and minorities since 1920. This is also an election year, facing more struggles than usual with current situations with regard to the pandemic and racial equality. Professor Faulkes had the task of designing this potentially contentious material, and she was excited about it as she has a passion for using design to bridge divides, notably with regards to social justice. For the last 10 years, Professor Faulkes has incorporated social justice and community development in her classes and spoken of this at national and international conferences. She organized 2 transdisciplinary conferences at WVU called Designing Across Divides, Co-Creating Tools for Community Change, which invited 5 colleges from WVU and city officials to collaborate, brought speakers from across the nation, and welcomed community members from all demographics to participate in 2012 and 2019. In August of 2019, she was given an award for advancing civil rights through advocacy by the WVU.
Okay. So, hello. You're looking at a couple of introverted graphic design students who are happy not to be sitting at a computer screen and who are feeling elated at making a difference in real time. Can you change the slide? There we go. For a little background, let me take you to December 8th, 2019, where a community potluck dinner in Morgantown saw a gay rabbi joking with a Buddhist, if anything, local activists, an assortment of homeless and addicted citizens, the mayor and several Morgantown city councilors, one of whom is a rabbi's husband, the president of the NAACP local chapter, local imam, members of the WVU Muslim Association, and Black and white community members from Morgantown and Scotts Run, which is a neighboring unincorporated former coal camp. They were all chatting and eating side by side while live music played softly. Chris Haddocks from the Davis College played guitar and sang some original songs that told stories about Scott's Run while his student fiddled. Later, Aristotle Jones, creative director for West Virginia Radio Corporation, played original Appalachian soul music just one day after his grandfather died. His grandfather was a Scott's Run musician. What brought all these folks together? Us, partly. What I've been asked to talk about today is where graphic design meets social justice. Slide. Let me first say that I've been speaking to you as an introvert. And I would guess that 85% of my students are introverts. I am only comfortable speaking with you because this is a topic I'm passionate about and I'm not making small talk, which is a shared property with Gloria Steinem. So in the spirit of Rosie the Riveter, I approach my students who think they come to WVU to make visual stuff only by throwing them into interactions with strangers and showing them they can do it also as an introvert. This list includes things that are important to my social justice thread that starts in my sophomore introductory class and blooms in my senior social impact class. Research and listening may be new and unexpected for students, but it's critical to helping them realize that ours is a service profession and that they need context to be effective in visual communication. Active listening begins with understanding yourself and what your body language is doing, how your implicit bias is impeding your ability to hear, the steps in reading body language of who is talking to cause connection and trust that establish a relationship. Research is also the background readings or listening to members of a similar community describe what their experience is so that you can be ready to hear. And it is also seeing what others have done before you with these topics. Preparing yourself is also looking at the indirect ways we communicate with metaphors, idioms, euphemisms, and practicing the visual translation of those who non-verbally attract a viewer. We can do that with different mediums, ranging from illustration to photo montage and Photoshop magic to video or expressive typography. Learning how to organize all that chaos into layers, prioritized for how close or how interested a viewer is, has to do with empathizing and imagining with an educated guest when they're ready to hear and see the next level of detail. Slide. Beth, can you change the slide? There we go. As a demonstration of that, let me jump into a quick preview of some areas you'll see in our physical exhibit on voter suppression. Here is a text from an essay written by one of our committee members on voter ID laws. And within it is a statistic that says only 31 of 1 billion votes over 14 years were fraudulent. We all know statistics and facts don't change people's minds, but they do reinforce a feeling you might already have. To make a fact more compelling, infographics can make you look. Here you can count zeros in 1 billion. They are overlaid by artwork submitted for political buttons that hit this topic. Once you're pulled in by the visual repetition of circles as zeros, you may become curious enough to read the text now, or when you come back. Circles connect this whole exhibit visually. I have also introduced a question on the circle that sets a context for your reading. Is the public being sold a bill of goods in voter ID laws? The copywriting play on word bill is redundant, like the circles. Students have to think of concept as being verbal and visual. Our minds constantly make connections and we can start the ball rolling. More circles. Slide. Beth, slide. Beth, can you hear me? Slide. A second area of the exhibit discusses voter turnout. And the text at the bottom left with a diagram of 10 countries to compare voter turnout where we are at the bottom. As a way of adding value and curiosity to the graphic, I kept her boxes with the countries, but added populations of each and enlarged circles for each country to give you an idea of geographic landmass comparisons. I didn't ask a question this time, but imagine that your mind would start to think about what these differences or other differences would have to do with this turnout number. Then you might go to the text to find out what you could, or a class might investigate it. I also borrowed from cartographers the idea of how many colors it takes to separate countries on a map so that two colors don't touch. We borrow from many disciplines. Next slide. Next slide. A third area in the exhibit talks about disenfranchisement. Whose vote is being taken away? Again, I take a statistic from Marjorie Fuller's essay to help you understand the impact of felons losing their right to vote. I've gone a bit further and reminded viewers that in addition to the 1 of 13 Black people losing their vote to incarceration compared to 1 of 56 white people, racial profiling has caused Blacks to be convicted at higher rates for the same crime for many reasons. Slide. Again, statistics alone don't change people's opinions. Emotions do. John Lewis, in an interview with Krista Tippett in 2013, talked about the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee training before the Freedom Rides in the early 60s. There, one of the most important lessons was to maintain eye contact at all times with those who might be attacking them, because it was a reminder to them that we are human. Next slide. Next slide. If these black and white faces appear to you through the circles from across the room, they might call you in. The graphic, when close up, gives you circles to count again. This is another way of engaging the viewer at different distances to give more as they are ready to hear it. Next slide. Dr. Ken Martis shared gerrymandering information with us. And to make his graphic that showed the distortion of redistricting or gerrymandering maps, I first showed West Virginia's gerrymandered 2nd Congressional District. This lightning bolt shape makes it nearly impossible for that representative to have a relationship or even visit constituents. In the blue circle beside it is a timeline from one district in Pennsylvania that changed from a reasonably shaped district in 1953 to the crazy moth-eaten shape of 2013. Below, you see the same shape superimposed as another way to comprehend it. To the right of that circle, a county in Mississippi shows you how redistricting managed to divide the minority population in order to diffuse their vote. And to the right of that illustrates how even the city of Jackson created wards that nullified the impact of minority votes on that level. This is why voting matters at every level of government. What you also see that brings a weird humor to the display is the use of the font Ugly Jerry, where a designer found enough crazy redistricting shapes to create a readable alphabet. On his site, he encourages viewers to download the font and write their representatives a note with it to ask for nonpartisan redistricting commissions to end this unfair discriminatory practice. Next slide. As a last preview, the staircase will show the contribution of the bicycle as an empowering invention for freeing women to travel independently, and one that became the symbol for women's suffrage. These bicycles hold artwork from the submissions that emphasize women's issues. The bicycle also makes an appearance throughout the exhibit as an actual mounted bike wheel, now and then with post-it messages to be affixed to the spokes as interactive contributions from the viewers. 13 different areas on the first floor, stairwell, and atrium will comprise this entire exhibit. So back to my students. Next slide. It's important to help my students realize that design has the power to empower and therefore comes with responsibility and accountability. To help them feel that, one of the projects in my second intro class this year was teaching how to integrate type and image in one-color illustrations to create a walking billboard for your hero's message. I will remind the class as an introduction. This was also teaching a production method as we silkscreened every student's design in class, pre-COVID, of course. Next slide. Next slide. Here are a few enough to see, large enough to see. Maria Shriver, Alzheimer's spokesman. Tarana Burke, founder of the Me Too movement. Angela Jolie as a breast cancer spokeswoman. And Jackie Robinson, the first Major League Black baseball player. Next slide. When I titled my senior course, I had these different descriptors from our field to choose from, all of which we might touch on, but we had certain important emphases that worked with this one, like social, that implies empathic relationship. The word impact gives attention to amplifying messages and stories and empowering the community. And design promises that you will do something and make something. After all, these seniors need portfolio pieces. Next slide. It's important that they're engaged. So I ask them before they come back for fall what's on their mind as needing change in our society and what product they would like to add to their portfolio. Then I build things I heard into summer planning. Just as we would do with a client, I try to grow a relationship with the students that includes their concerns, hopes, and buy-in before I introduce them to a community. In this meeting, some wanted to experience identity and branding. Some actually wanted to work in a community and had seen our previous work. Several wanted a website experience. Some have seen us do silkscreen, CNC routing, or bookbinding and want to make things. One wanted to practice lettering. We had 6 clients and 12 students working in teams of sizes needed. This blue bar at the right is just a list of primary sources, which were live people, and readings, blogs, podcasts, articles, and TED Talks that would prepare us for a demographic, topic, or give us a lens to see or listen. Next slide. Flexibility is integral to maintaining a relationship. Trust is the ultimate goal, undergirded with being responsible and honest. In this respect, I try hard to model this behavior, including the nobody's perfect part, and being honest about that. To help students gain respect for impoverished communities and for our clients to have pride in themselves, we use this community capitals model introduced to me by Dr. Margaret Stout and her grad students as we work together in community development projects. It measures value beyond financial capital. None of our clients had big financial wealth, but impoverished Scots Run has giant social capital built over generations, cultural values that are needed today and stories to tell. This chart quickly shows what they have as assets, and we can star several goals that we want to build up as we do projects together. Next slide. I want to introduce you to 3 of our communities from the fall semester. Scots Run Museum and Trail has great stories that prove their cultural, social, and human capital. They've survived together as a family in their own diversity that speaks lessons for today. Our projects over the last 9 years aim to share those to educate the public, growing human capital, political clout, and ultimately build capital for a permanent 3rd place. Next slide. Next slide. An example of my own work with Scots Run is this artist book that is 370 pages of silkscreen descriptions of miners' deaths or accidents reported in the Dominion Post from 1917 to 1952. These were painstakingly copied from microfilm by a 92-year-old Lou Baracus, whose parents were Greek immigrants. Some pages fold out to show events that claimed up to 56 lives at a time. This is the only memorial to miners in this community and becomes an artifact people look through in the museum to find names of relatives. It lives in a handmade box and is bound on linen tapes made to mimic the tracks for mine cars. A copy has also been exhibited in New York and Huntington museums. Next slide. Flexibility in working with clients extends to the recognition of our own bumps. A flexibility challenge happened as we started the first semester for me, as I missed the first day because of a death in my immediate family. Chris Haddocks filled in for me to introduce Scots Run by talking about our research working with the community, and he played for the class the songs Scots Run had commissioned from him.
"7 miles long from its head to its mouth, joins with the mob coming up from the south. Pull up the chair out this place that we call Scott's Run.
Okay, that's a bit of that. So I missed a second class the following week to accept that governor's award for civil rights advocacy, partly for work in this course and all due to relationships I keep with community groups and organizations at the state, local, and international level. Our own student cohort experienced engagements, family death, and birth this semester. Our most organized students turned in her portfolio in early stages of labor and held her new son December 7th of finals week. Most human-centered design courses happen on the graduate level. Ours has a particular modification intended for undergraduate introduction. All of our experiences are about planting seeds and sampling the process. With each project, we try different tools to help develop empathy and relationships, careful to stay humble about the dipping of our toes in this field. I brought in this professional, Mark Reddig of Fit Associates, who is also an adjunct faculty at the School of Visual Arts in New York and Carnegie Mellon University's graduate design program. His Fit Associates' mission is to equip change leaders with capacity to make change in social complexity, and to pronounce all this. I wanted him to teach us about active listening before we went into our first set of interviews with the Scott's Run community members. Now I'd like to introduce you to 3 of the communities we met. Next slide. Meet Al Anderson. He looks like any other older Black man on the street, but he's more than that. He's the unofficial mayor of once incorporated Osage. He was just one of our interviews to get to know the community's members' dreams. He has many. To say he's beloved is to look at the number of hits when a building collapsed next to his and people thought he had died. He asked me to post on our Facebook page that he wasn't. 13,000 plus hits. And he's more. Slide.
Girl of my dreams, I'd like to thank you for waiting patiently. Daddy's home to stay.
Daddy's home, in relation to the Scott's Run community, has to do with the relief of a family felt every day that their minor or father or husband returned home from that only too real and too dangerous occupation. The beauty of this community is its welcoming and its lessons of integration, as they know what matters and they can rely on one another in a culture that accepts flaws and forgives and laughs through much of the small stuff. After listening and doing service hours for the street fair, we got to work putting into play what we heard in this year's story. Next slide. The museum is definite third place for this community, and its members chose from among 2 tries at a concept and gave more content to be added. Next slide. One place we heard about was the Bunny Hop, a 50s and 60s dance hall that attracted people from all over, even if they had to hop a train, Coltrane in high heels. It was now abandoned. What if we brought it to life a bit? We checked with the museum members as concepts developed to see if we were doing it in their voice. This would become the 7th interpretive sign, not counting the community garden and murals and business signs that we'd made for the museum trail in previous semesters. Next slide. Kelly Lee designed the Bunny Hop logo. It hadn't had one, but ours conveyed the right era. We made a prototype for the street fair by silk screening it onto chalk painted masonite. Then members could add stories to their, add their memories to their stories. Next slide. Here are the final symbol and composite illustrations for the windows of the building. If the community liked it at the street fair, it would be made permanently out of aluminum and commercial printing. It became so real for them that they kept forgetting that the elements other than the front couple were taken from Providence photos and speculated who they were. Next slide. And here's the prototype tested at the street fair by a smiling Willa Harris, 90, whose parents owned it for a time. Next. A second offering was an interactive exhibit that would invite people to see and taste recipes, including the recipe for a resilient community that they were part of. Cups of the more soupy ones could be purchased. Next. Two ideas were presented and then modified by the community. Next. Then Rebecca Patton got to work producing the stereotype. Her final report documents the experience at the street fair. We made 3 recipes. 2 turned out and 1 generated some laughter, but that made this class 1 with them. Next. The combinations of flipping parts of the grid could provide extra images and stories, including the painful one where Nurse 79 bisected their community. Next. A bit closer, you can see some of the phrases incorporated from earlier semesters that are now owned by the museum. Next. And at the fair, you see a hint of love across the ethnicities at this pre-COVID fair. Yes, I am no longer an objective researcher, but another family member. Next. Morgantown Pride is a new community, but off to an exciting start with cultural, human, and organizational capital as assets. Our projects hope to educate, grow human capital, help them grow social capital to connect with one another, and create political capital to advocate for social justice and fairness toward their community. Next. Our other team had been working toward a deadline for the next day after the street fair, September 15th. Pride had evolved from a block party in the summer that was permitted for 50 people. When it looked like it was going to be more popular, they revised their permit for 300. Over 1,000 came. Now they needed to get organized. They came to us as a 501c3. 4 of the 12 people in my class are either gay or have siblings, gay or trans. We were excited. It was not only helping this event, but their own colleagues. With West Virginia Pride, we enhanced a lecture for the WVU Diversity Week hosted by the very gay-friendly Presbyterian Church. Calling it a tea party, we silk screened on site t-shirts that Zane had designed in my sophomore class 2 years before. Next. We designed a social media campaign for the event, and one of the shirts made it all the way to Geneva, Switzerland. Next. For all our projects with them, we use the project management software Slack to communicate with one another, with groups, or to privately direct message me. Some students worked on logos, some on event packaging, and some on social media ideas. Next. One of the ways we acquainted ourselves with the culture was our client was also on Slack, but they met with us face-to-face once a week. Next. One of the ways we acquainted ourselves with the culture was to watch and reflect on Natalie Wynn's vlog episode on pronouns. Next. And we made use of the free Gilbert Baker font for our social media. Baker also designed the rainbow flag. Next. 3 logos were presented to their board. Ones not used became incorporated into other messages the community could use. One starred in a children's book on acceptance. Next. Callie Robinson's mark was chosen and the brand took off. Next. We even branded the service blueprint we had designed to keep track of all the design artifacts needed for the semester of Pride activities and who was doing what. Next. Maggie McClister got to practice her hand lettering on cards for Pride. Zane Huggins took pronouns and other terms to make a booklet to educate allies. Next. This poster for the Queer Hoedown event was designed by Cassie Perry. Next. Rebecca Patton completed the hand-coded responsive website on October 4th. Next. And Pride joined the WVU Homecoming Parade with new signs and banners, with the Presbyterian pastor marching with Pride officers. Next. Our middle project was directed at making art for this Undefeated exhibit. We considered our audience to be their peer community, as well as a general WVU crowd that patronized the Wise Library from all political points of view. Geography professor Dr. Ken Martis and Molly Kennedy from the ACLU gave an overview of issues in voter suppression so that students would have outside experts for context. Next. A living witness I brought in for the sophomore class working on voter suppression was one of the actual freedom riders, Joan C. Browning. She's a contemporary of John Lewis, born in Georgia, also to a sharecropper family, and one of 9 white female freedom riders for whom this issue was so important that they left college, made out their wills before getting on the bus in case the effort required their lives. Next. I was teaching a unit on typography and lettering, using voter suppression as the content. My classroom demo became one of the submissions in the artwork as well. Next. Here are several of the sophomore contributions. The one in the center was such a positive statement that I enlarged it to be one of the major graphics in the show. Next. The Ways of Caring mural was an idea 2 years in the making. When our client was the city of Morgantown that had just adopted their welcoming resolution. It was the brainchild of one of my students who is now working in DC. We had needed permission to use a wall and a bit of funding, which fell into place 2 weeks before school started this year. It's a mural of diversity, humility, and leadership. And the idea was to paint it with the same demographics of those being welcomed. This was the mock-up we were working from that held diverse community members who made a difference in the community and are largely unsung. Next. This project was probably the most truly blended example of community participation I have experienced. It included the gamut of citizens who frequent Morgantown's downtown, be it the customers of the free clinic it's painted on, local business folk, students, people from all walks of life. All were invited to participate and enjoy the chatter that happens when working side by side. The paint by dot let skittish non-artists feel good about contributing. Next. Here is one group of painters from the Friendship House. Their founder, John Garlow Sr., was being painted on the wall. Next. We did the high ladder stuff. We used low-tack stencil material to dab the color of paint we wanted on the wall through the type stencil, and then touched it up since the surface was very old brick. Next. Here's a view of the alleyway that had been part of a park of sorts. It was a chance for us to practice verbatims as we recorded amazing conversations until we could figure out what to do with them, which we hope will be in a book. Three of the figures we painted are still living in the area. Sarah Little becomes a celebrity. You met her at Scott's Run. You should know that she also sang for President Franklin Roosevelt in 1942 and worked in the Pentagon, meeting Generals Patton and MacArthur. Next. You also met Yasmin Mustafa, an activist with Greater Morgantown's Interfaith Association and everyone's mom. Conversations unfolded between folks who might never expect to talk with one another. Next. Even zombies stopped by. Next. And later cleaned up nicely for our community dinner. Next. Which is where we started. All of our local clients were involved. All the people touched by our projects or projects in past years from groups we keep in contact with were invited, and you should have been there. Next. From excerpts in the recordings that share moments of importance to them and from direct messages in Slack that also showed what they valued, I feel this has been an important journey for us in seed planting. They were also very clear about what would make it better. Fewer projects and more time to get deeper, and I love that advice too. Next. Now we need to figure out how to do it in a COVID world that has had enough of social injustice. We have our first grant for that to work with Scott's Run in the fall. Hopefully we will also pick up on something with this lovely community as we do it. They and we will also benefit from any actions we take to reduce voter suppression. Come see the exhibit. Thank you.
Thank you, Eve. That was great. And everybody, we are going to take questions in the Q&A, or you can raise your hand. So Eve, Sally Deskins asks, what's been the most exciting part of designing Undefeated?
I think the opportunity, seeing, I don't think I've ever done something maybe this timely. It hits exactly right when we need to hear it. And I'm excited that there can be ways to try and reach people who have been sleeping, if it's possible to sleep through this. So just figuring out any way that the really great information that our essay writers gave us, how to make that come alive and figure out if it can be teased into someone's consciousness. The most challenging divide. The hardest one is always the political one, and it's one we're not supposed to talk about. As university people, we have to stay objective, and yet it's the one that causes us not to be able to talk to our own families, and divides us in ways that make it hard to even see media that's not been specifically analytically coming to us in ways that we can get the disinformation out of it.
Okay, and we've got a question from Nina Chase. How can you be an introvert and a university professor at the same time?
The only way is to have a topic you're in love with. This is the only way.
And Travis Williamson says, who saw students become engaged with the issues they knew nothing about through the Undefeated project. How do you think the design process differs compared to a lecture setting when introducing students to these topics?
Well, I would think the light comes on when they see that making art can satisfy something beyond their own interest, and it can actually have this empowering effect. And it comes on for some people as sophomores, some people as seniors, and some people after they graduate. And I think it's such a powerful thing when done right that it has to come with this sense of responsibility. You have to do your research. You can't be surprised by something you didn't check out. And so I think that makes it real. I think most people that go into design are in it to make stuff. And they have to realize that making stuff has all these other parts of the process.
And Nina also asks, what's your hometown? Are you a West Virginian?
I am a West Virginian. I was born in South Charleston and grew up in an even more rural place north of Charleston. That's Pinch. It was a bedroom community of Charleston. I didn't think I was going to come back to West Virginia. Like most people, I was trying to get out and find more things. And I happened to come back because this position opened up and I thought I'd give back a little. And I've been giving back for 41 years.
So a couple people asked about swag. Is there, or will there be any material things produced from this exhibit that people might have or get?
Yes, in fact, all the artwork is round because it's in the format of political buttons, and the ones that can be reduced and are the favorite ones are going to be on site, and we would have to ask Sally how they get distributed, but I know we're going to punch out a whole bunch of them.
And Judith Stitzel says, can you stay with dealing with the political a little longer? Maybe contrasting political with partisan. What can your design approach do? What can print that print itself cannot?
Well, we have always, every time there's an election, we do get out the vote posters, and so does my profession. The AIGA does nonpartisan get out the vote stuff. And what it does is it addresses the issues that policy is made from and lets you discover how that means you're going to vote and who you'll support. So we don't mention names of any candidates, but we do address issues because issues affect every one of us all the time.
Thank you. And thank you. Nina has another question about when you were away from West Virginia, where did you go?
I lived in Rhode Island. I did my graduate work in Rhode Island School of Design and stayed on at a studio there. I guess you wanted a longer answer.